And rising, beautiful people, what's going on? This is Mike with the 1% Mindset. I hope you're doing absolutely amazing. It is Monday. What is it? Monday, September 25th, episode 3. I want to say it's 366 of the Mental Jolt podcast. Don't quote me on it. I could be wrong. My assistant, Jolt, thank you so much. You always hold it down. But I believe this is episode 366. I had a hell of a weekend, right? And I'll talk to you guys a little bit about this. But of course, before we go any further, this is your jolt of inspiration each and every single morning to get your day started. It's your cup of coffee of motivation, or as I like to say, it's the work before the work. Whether you're on your way to school, gym, work, wherever it is, this podcast will get your day started. Man, as you can see, I'm fumbling over words, and there's a lot of things that's in the space. And I had a leadership training this weekend that lasted all day. I probably had maybe 7 or 8 hours of sleep since Thursday, from Thursday to Sunday. So forgive me if I'm fumbling over words, but I want to come to you in an authentic space because it's important, because there's so much learning in that space. One of the things that I did was I was teaching. I teach young people financial literacy, and I also I have them think outside of the box in so many different areas, because when your mind can't perceive or see something, it automatically gets to a place and gets to a point where it says, okay, this is impossible. Or if it is possible, I'm going to do everything in my power to sabotage myself in a way to get back to something I'm familiar with. All right, so when I was speaking to these young people about money, about goals, and I showed them different people who lost all the who made money and lost all of it, or who spent it to get back to where they're comfortable with. The lesson in that was, if you don't expand your mind, if you don't believe it is truly possible, then you'll do everything in your power to make sure that that's the truth. Right? It's almost like you give a lottery, when you see so often lottery winners, win money, and you hear, oh, within 5 years they go broke. Why? Right? Because they're not mentally used to that. And I told a story in college where I got a refund check, and at the time I used to work at Wendy's way back when, and then I never saw a lot of money in my account. Right? I was making $6.25 an hour at the time. Again, we're talking mid 2000s, and so I brought home a month, maybe about $500 a month, and it was cool, right? Because I never had that money before. But when I got to college and I got a refund check that said 3,000, I was like, oh, I got a comma. So what did I do? Simple. I decided, it made so much sense to me at the time, to spend the money to get back to the number that I'm comfortable with. Because if I'm comfortable seeing that number, then I'm okay, because that's what's possible. And the kids started to get it. And the same way I did that, I did a leadership training where I'm coaching adults, and they have the same issue. And sometimes it's in money, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Sometimes it could just be in different areas of their life, right? Where they think that if they can't make this time, or if they're too busy, or if things look a certain way, I can't do it. It doesn't work. It's not possible. And I had to reframe it. 100% is possible 100% of the time. Right? Hear me out. 100% is possible 100% of the time. That is the mindset that you have to go in, because when you deem or see things as impossible, then it will be. Right? At the time, it was, according to doctors, scientifically impossible for, I want to say it's Roger Bannister, but I could be wrong, the person who first broke the 4-minute mile. Before the 4-minute mile was done, before it was completed, you know what happened? Doctors and people say, oh, it's possible your lungs will burst, it's too tough, it's too fast. As soon as the first person broke the 4-minute mile barrier for what was deemed as impossible at the time, I believe it was like 15 or 16 people broke it the following year. Right? What was deemed impossible all of a sudden became possible. Why am I saying that? Right? Because a lot of times it's a mindset shift. When you kind of place yourself up against the wall, right? The ceiling, it kind of stops you, right? You're stopped because you're like, man, I can't do this. This is impossible. No one has done this before, right? Or this isn't me anymore. Or you can't do this, right, because of these limitations, these circumstances. Forget your circumstance. How can you make sure it's possible no matter what? How can you create a space for you to realize that you can get this done? You can do this. You can have it all. How? What does that look like for you? Like, what is it like to be in a space now of possibility, instead of closing the door before you even give it a chance to open? Right? That's something to think about. That's something that I thought about with my kids when I was teaching my students, as well as when I was coaching these adults. Right? Something to think about. So, anyway, of course, I love you. Peace.